Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I am so proud to welcome Sendable as our sponsor. Sendable is the social media management platform that I personally prefer to handle all of our storytelling online. Sendable has generously offered you, an ardent Business of Story listener, an incredible 30% discount on their traction plan. It's normally $99 a month, but if you use my link, you can get it for just $69 a month. So visit sendable.com/park30 to start your free 30-day trial today.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture, I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands, people buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. Park Howell here. You know, I was just over at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego just this past weekend, presenting my approach to the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling in branding and in business. And I'm honored to have made my 5th appearance. So for the last 5 years, I've been able to share the business of story with literally thousands of social media pros. It's quite an honor. You know, and while I was there, I was talking with Social Media Examiner founder Michael Stelzner. Of course, he and his team produce what I hear now is the largest gathering of social media professionals in the world. And it is such a blast. It's not only a community, but it really does actually feel like a family. He and I were talking, and he gave me an idea for our show that he does for his podcast, which is called Social Media Marketing Podcast. And this idea is kind of a promotional engagement thing that actually involves you. Because as a host of a podcast, I hear from you. You send me emails and you ping me on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and I really appreciate that. I mean, it's very heartwarming to know this passion project is having the impact it is. But now I want to step it up a little bit. I want to see you in action listening to the show. So what I'm going to do, again, Michael gave me this idea, is while you're listening to the show, take a selfie of you. You know, where do you listen to it? I hear that people do it while they're working out, of course, while they're driving into the office. Be careful about that selfie while you're driving into the office. While they're hiking, while they're skiing, all over the place. So I would love to see a picture of where you listen to the Business of Story, even if you got your earbuds in and you're hanging out on your bike all sweaty. I mean, I think the more interesting shot, the more unique the situation, the better. But you be the judge of that. And then take that selfie and post it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever is your social media channel of choice, and use the hashtag Business of Story Podcast. Hashtag Business of Story Podcast. What I'm going to do is every week I'm going to search through the Business of Story Podcast hashtags, and I am going to select 3 winners. Each of those winners, and if you're one of them, here's what you get. You either will get my free DIY workbook, which is not free actually, we charge $90 for it. And by the way, that $90 investment has grown businesses 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10 times where they are. So it's a small investment in the first place to really have a big impact on your business. But what I'll do is give you the choice. You can either have one of those free interactive PDF workbooks to work on your own brand, or I will give you a special secret code to our brand new online course that will get you 50% off that course. So it's either the workbook for free or 50% off of our brand new online course. And I'm so excited about this course because I also launched it at Social Media Marketing World last weekend. And the thing about the course is it really delivers 2 things for you. Number one, it helps answer that question, who is my brand? What do I stand for? And how do I clearly articulate it? So I take you by the hand, walk you through the 10-step story cycle system, each step is captured in a chapter, you will grow greater understanding and appreciation for your own brand story so that you can really stand out above the noise and hook the hearts of your audiences. In addition, like no other brand creation process out there, every chapter also has a story quest in it where I will teach you my 3 favorite story frameworks that you can use for all of your messaging. Not just for sharing your brand stories, but you can use them in your email writing, in your content development, in your video creation. So this online course, a Business of Story online course, is a 1-2 punch. It not only helps you dial in your brand story, but it also teaches you how to use it and be impactful in sharing your story with the world. So you can check that out at businessofstory.thinkific.com. businessofstory.thinkific.com. So whether you're going to be posting a selfie or not of you listening to the show, and you're tired of like living with that brand doubt and being unclear about your own brand, or you're looking for a proven process that you can use with your own clients and their brand story development, then check out our online course, businessofstory.thinkific.com. This is the same system that has grown brands by as much as 600%. Adelante Healthcare, they dialed in their story back in 2009, launched it in 2010, and have grown by 600%. Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona, using the same system, has grown by 400%. A couple weeks ago, I had on my show Andre Martin Hobbs, the founder of Pret Auto Partes, a used car dealership in Montreal that focuses on helping their customers repair their credit through this vehicle to financial freedom, the cars that they sell. An amazing program, and his brand is quadrupling in sales since he launched his brand story just a couple years ago. So this is all waiting for you at our new online course, which is really more of a DIY tutorial because you are actually going to craft your story as you go through it at businessofstory.thinkific.com. And who knows, you might be so successful with your story down the road that you will land on this incredible website called brandstruck.co. Brandstruck.co. Have you seen it? I learned about it about a month ago. I was on LinkedIn and I came across our guest today, Magdalena Adamska. She is the founder of brandstruck.co. And what that is, it is the only online database of brand strategies and case studies of hundreds of the most iconic brands in the world. And the reason why she created it is she has 16 years experience in the branding marketing world, working with like big brands, Google, Nike, MTV, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, Procter & Gamble, Cadbury, to name a few. But she had the problem when she was developing and building their brands of finding research that she could count on, that was comprehensive and that was accurate about other brand case studies that she could use to inspire and provide insight into her own brand creation. So because this resource did not exist, Magdalena decided to create it for herself, and now it's out there. It's been running for several years. I came across it, and I'm telling you, for me anyways, it is the single most powerful, most comprehensive database website online that you can go in and research these incredible brand stories and brand strategies, and then apply some of those insights to your own work, to your own customers, to your own brand. So here we have Magdalena today on the Business of Story. Please welcome her, and we're going to talk about the similarities she sees in brands that do a really good job with their brand building, and then talk a little bit about some of those brands that don't pay honor to their overall brand narrative and take off on a harebrained campaign that kind of blows up in their face. Plus, we're going to also look at the power of personality archetypes as it relates to your brand and your brand building. So let's get after it right now with Magdalena Adamska from Brandstruck right here on the Business of Story. Magda, welcome to the show all the way from London.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Just got through the holidays. Now we've got January kicking on. Actually, by the time they hear this, it'll be February for them.
Okay.
So a terrific guest to kick off 2020 because you're doing some really interesting things in the branding world. I first learned about you on LinkedIn, and I don't even know if it was a note you sent out or maybe it was an article I read, but when I started reading about Brandstruck and your company and what you're doing, collecting these brand case studies for the rest of us to make life easy for the rest of us to learn how the largest, most admired brands are doing their brand storytelling. I thought, wow, it'd be cool to have you on the show. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And this is the first podcast you said you've ever been on.
Yes, this is my first podcast.
Awesome.
Hopefully not the last one.
Well, no, hopefully after hearing this, more people are going to want to have you on their show. So nice to have you here. Now, tell us, you've got quite a storied career in the branding marketing world, working for some pretty major brands. Can you take us to a moment in your life, maybe when you were a kid, when you look back now, that following a curiosity or a passion has kind of helped inform who you are today?
Funny you should ask that, because actually I have a story from my, maybe not childhood, but when I was in, I think probably high school. I always liked commercials. I even liked commercials more than regular content on TV. So I was always switching between the channels just to watch commercials. And when at my university, I found out that there is that a job called a brand strategist exists, I got really excited. It was this moment when I felt like this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help brands with their brand strategies. And I started as a strategic planner working for advertising agencies. And this is where I worked for brands such as Nike, Avon, Nestle, Danone, and many, many other brands. Then after a few years, I changed sides. So I moved to the client side and I was working for youth and music brands at Viacom, mostly the MTV brand. And while on the agency side, I learned more theory of brand strategy and positioning and brand architecture, while on the client side, you learn more about the practice of what it really means to implement a brand strategy. And I was in charge of the entire P&L, so I also learned a lot about brand management. And then after Viacom and MTV, I moved to a global brand strategy role at a company called Pearson. I moved to London. This is where I'm based now, so it's been 7 years.
Is Pearson a big education company?
Yes. And it's interesting that you actually perceive them as an education company, because it took them years to reposition themselves from a publishing company to an education company.
And were you a part of that transition?
I was working for one of the departments responsible for English learning, English as a second language. And my job there was to help them with the brand architecture and brand strategy for all the acquired brands, how to integrate the acquired English learning and English teaching brands into a wider Pearson ecosystem. And they had a number of different brands, including business language tools such as Global English and a number of language schools, especially in China and so on. And so we wanted to create one brand over all of these businesses.
So did you learn this, how to do this in school, or was it really the school gave you the foundation for it, but you learned it, as we say, by the seat of your pants as you're doing it in these different roles?
So I was studying marketing. So I learned basics, and the theory of marketing at school. But I must admit, I didn't learn much about branding, brand strategy, and brand architecture. And I'm learning to this day. Even last year, every day I learned something new, something interesting. So no, school probably helped me widen my horizons. Mm-hmm. But the best learnings are always, when you implement things, when you're in charge of things rather than just reading about them.
And what did you like better? Did you like working on the client side, like inside of Nike, or did you like working the agency side?
So working on the agency side, I always felt like I'm more an agency person. I felt a stronger connection with people working on the agency side. But at some point I got frustrated. I don't see the results of my work. So I was preparing presentations and creative briefs, I was helping with different campaigns and repositioning processes, but you rarely see the results of your work while you are on the client side. And especially when you are into brand management, you're in charge of the P&L and you understand what impact your decisions have, on the entire business. So when I was working for MTV and a few other brands at Viacom, every single day I would get the result, of my work in the form of TV ratings. So if we were doing a good job, the ratings were good, and then the revenue, was proportional to the ratings. If we didn't do something, that well, then it was also you could see this in the ratings. And of course, you also track the performance of your brand. You do brand trackers, and this is what I liked working on the client side, is the fact that you are accountable for your work. You're responsible for the results. You're not only responsible, for just giving advice. You're also responsible for taking this advice and implementing it and delivering the results.
Well, that's so true, because we see that too. I ran my own ad agency for 20 years, and unless you were really embedded inside that client, your best work, you would get to them and you were never quite sure how it was being implemented. And then they might come back and complain, maybe, they didn't see the conversion, or they didn't see, the ROI they were hoping for. And you really had no idea, how did they actually make it happen? And was it the case of our work not working? Or was it the case of really poor implementation?
Yes. I totally agree. And I truly believe that the agencies, like today's agencies, should actually be more interested, in getting closer to the client's business. While my experience is that they are not always interested in that they are just more interested in delivering creative ideas, which is great. This is, what they do best. But I think for them, quite often, creative awards are more important than the results of the creative work. And I think both boxes, should be ticked.
So you've been in the branding world, marketing world for almost 20 years. What have you seen that has changed the most from the old way of branding to what works best now?
So I think the branding world, like the marketing world, has this, waves when suddenly something becomes the most important part of the strategy, and then time shows whether it was really important or not. But I think the biggest change that has taken place since I started working for my first agency, which was in 2003, is the fact that is the entire now movement called the purpose-driven branding. I think this is the biggest change, and at some point, many people thought that this was just a fad, that it was just another marketing concept that will disappear, like many others. But I think it's here to stay.
Why do you think that is? Because I happen to agree with you on that. Purpose-driven brands stand for so much more, and they attract more high-paying, loyal customers than anyone else. Why do you think that is, or from your experience seeing it on a global level?
Okay, so first of all, I need to say that I don't believe in purpose-driven marketing, meaning that you're a company that is purely profit-driven. And then just, to sell more of your product, you just add brand purpose, on top of what you're doing, without really changing the essence of, who you are as a company, what your values are, what your portfolio is, and so on. So I don't think this is sustainable, because people will understand that they are just, that this is bullshit, in other words. And
can you point to a brand that has fallen into that trap?
A lot of brands are my clients, so I can't really use the names. But I think at this point, most of the brands which try to, they think, now there's this brand purpose thing, so we need to create brand purpose, and they treat this as a purely messaging exercise. So they think once they kind of articulate their purpose. They put it on their website, deal done, and they don't need to do anything else. And then
they don't back it up at all.
Yes, and then you end up with toilet paper companies, having big purpose and so on. Sometimes it's funny. So, but I believe that the companies that take the whole purpose thing seriously, I think they will be in a great place probably like 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a number of companies that have changed their entire business strategies, their entire product portfolio, just to make sure that they are purpose driven. So an example of such companies, I prefer to give good examples. And of course, this is still work in progress. They probably still make many mistakes, and they still, are some of them are public companies and they need to deliver results. But as a brand strategist, I totally appreciate what they do. So one example is Danone, for example. So Danone, in the past, they had a number of businesses that were not related, to health, didn't have any health benefits, like beer, biscuits, some sweets. And they probably 10 or even more years ago, they started selling these businesses just to make sure that their entire portfolio is health driven. And they have this mission, a company's mission, which is bringing health through food to as many people as possible. And they could easily deliver this mission just through messaging, and nice ad campaigns. But what they're doing is much more. Sometimes they don't focus, on short-term profits and sell. They sold some businesses which were very profitable, just to make sure that the new businesses they acquire are in line with this purpose. Another example is Philips. Philips is a Dutch company which was for many years it was known for it was a TV producer, and now
it's a television set. So
yes.
Philips Electronics.
Yes, so they I'm not sure whether they produce any more TVs. Because they're focusing. So they define their purpose as making the world healthier and more sustainable through innovation. And the way they treat innovation, they talk a lot about meaningful innovation. So innovation for them is not a goal in itself. Like for many tech companies, they just innovate to innovate. While for Philips, it's more about meaningful innovating. So they have moved from TV sets and home cinemas to like this healthcare and well-being solutions. So some examples include like breastfeeding products, electronic pain relief solutions, some ultrasound products that reduce infant mortality and so on. So they, again, made this change at the business strategy level rather than just in messaging. If you want to implement your purpose just on the messaging level, and then there's nothing really more, then, it just, I don't believe, it makes sense. People will not buy into it.
Yeah, I've seen Philips firsthand out in Eindhoven. I had a chance to visit them on 4 separate occasions when I was teaching at Arizona State University in their sustainability leadership program there, and got a chance to get embedded out at Philips for a day with our students. We did it every year, and we could see the progression that they were making. And granted, we were primarily more on the supply chain and operational side of Philips, but learned about a lot of the different products they're doing. And one of the most interesting things that, for me anyways, that they're doing is lighting as a service. So instead of going into municipalities and selling them all their light bulbs and electronics and so forth to make it happen, they said, put us on contract and we will come in and just install, manage, repair, maintain everything that's happening in your lighting, even to the point that they bring in technology that brightens lights, street lamps, and dims them depending on traffic and that kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
And it's really brilliant because it makes them become even more innovative on how to most efficiently build those products. So they're not in there constantly having to change them out and the cost associated with that. So it's gone from that one-time consumption, consumable light bulb, into this ongoing lighting as a service program, and it saves money. It's becomes much more sustainable, and then they work very, very hard down their supply chain to be able to make sure that their beliefs and values are reflected in the thousands of suppliers that help them make their world happen.
That's interesting.
And I was thinking when I asked you about an example of a brand that didn't live into their purpose, and it's probably one of the first ones, right? It leading into this purpose-driven brand world a decade or two ago was British Petroleum, BP. And they were talking this big game, but they certainly weren't walking it. And then it all blew up with them with their disaster down in the Mexico Gulf of Mexico. So that's a probably at the very top of the list in my mind of a brand that's not living into it. But you have had a chance to work with a lot of different brands, and you've created Brand Struck, and it's brandstruck.co, where people like myself and marketers and brand storytellers can go and access, I don't know how many different brands you have in there, but they're some of the most admired brands in the world.
Yes.
Look at how they do it, what their brand essence is and strategy is and so forth. What was the impetus for creating this database?
So to be absolutely honest with you, I launched Brandstruck out of frustration because
but isn't that where the best ideas come from? Is that our own frustration? How come somebody's not servicing me?
I was 100% sure that a tool like this already exists, because I definitely needed a tool like this when I was working on the agency side, because it takes, like, any strategist will tell you how much time it takes to decode other brands, their brand strategy, the positioning. It just takes ages. And instead of focusing on developing a strategy for your client, you spend this time decoding, some other strategies. And I think it was, I believe, it was in a way like a waste of time, because there should be a tool where you could just go and easily check, this is like the information every brand strategist should know. What is the positioning of Nike? What is the positioning of Adidas? What is the positioning of Apple, Tesla, and some other brands? Because once you know all these brand strategies, once you're aware of what have been done, you are much better equipped then to create strategies for your own company or for your clients. So that's why I launched Brandstruck, because I was really surprised it didn't exist. So that's my story. And
how long ago did you launch it?
So I started working on Brandstruck in January 2016, and at the beginning, at the end of 2016, I had an early bird version, kind of like a beta version, and at the beginning of 2017, it's a full-blown product, and the access is sold at full prices. So it's 3-4 years, I would say, 3 full years of operations, and we've managed to get like really high-profile clients, and interestingly, most of our clients they found us through Google. They just search for a specific brand strategy or information on positioning of a particular brand in a category or brand archetypes, and this is how they find us. So our clients include branding agencies such as Interbrand, Landor, advertising agencies like Grey or Saatchi & Saatchi, Gilvey, and we have a number of clients themselves, like Heineken, HBO, Vice, and some more. So
what was the hardest part about building that out? So it sounds like you spent about a year in 2016 building it out, getting the content, and launching your beta before you went full-blown in 2017. What was the most difficult part of that?
So I think creating the content was the most difficult part, because this is the part that for me was absolutely the most important part. So I could live with the fact as, I don't know, maybe the platform is not ideal, that maybe there's something, not perfect with the UX, although I hope it's almost perfect. But I wouldn't be able to live if the case studies were not correct, let's say. So
and robust. How hard was it to get those case studies? Did you have to go and do all the research yourself?
Yes.
Or would brands freely give you that information?
No.
That's what I was wondering. I figured that might be behind a firewall or something.
No, this is all of the information we use for the case studies. This is information which is publicly available, but not easily found. So if you're looking for, so that was, why I was so frustrated before launching BrandTrack, because if you look for any information about different brands, you find a lot of useless content, sometimes on the first page of Google searches, and you just read this and you feel, there's nothing there. There are a lot of keywords, but no substance whatsoever. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to create.
So was it just you, or did you have other people helping you amass this information?
I had other people helping me, but every single case study was, by now, every single case study was rewritten by me again, because then I needed to update the case studies because brands change their strategies from time to time. So if there is a change in strategy, we always update the case studies to make sure that it reflects the current brand strategy. So I think, the biggest problem, the biggest challenge was creating the content. And I must admit, I was absolutely delusional when it comes to my the timeline I set up for myself. I thought it would be much quicker. Also, I had a number of lessons on the way, because at the beginning I thought that the shorter the case study, the more useful it will be, because you read it quickly, you understand this is the brand strategy. Okay, I get it. If I need to read something more, I will. But then, I met a lot of clients and agencies, and I was presenting BrandTrack. Then I noticed that actually, being too, the case studies, if they are too short and if the language used is too simple, that they don't resonate with them that well, actually.
Yeah, they want you to do their work for them. So to be able to have all that information laid out just to make their life easier as they're
yes, but they wanted the case studies, to be a bit longer, even though the percentage of content in content was the same. It's just the vocabulary, to be more elaborate, more, a bit more sophisticated, so that it sounded more serious, let's say. So, but this is my target audience. It's not a piece of advice I would give to anybody else, because I'm sure there are audiences that appreciate, simplicity and being very brief.
But these are the professionals out there that are really working to sculpt a brand story for a company, either internally or externally. How many case studies do you have on the site now?
So at the moment, I think it's around 220.
220.
In total.
What did you launch with?
I launched with 100.
100. And after you launched, did you ever get any brands come back to you and say, hey, you've got us on your website and this information isn't correct, or had to clarify anything?
No, the opposite.
Really?
The opposite. So yes, so I met with a few brands and showed the case studies, and the feedback was always very, very positive, that this is absolutely, the reflection of what the brand strategy is. One time I got an email from a girl from Facebook saying that they just changed their brand mission and that I should include the new brand mission. And this brand mission wasn't announced anywhere else yet. It was on their website, but they didn't do a big announcement of it. So this is when I changed it. But I also I'm not sure whether I should share this story.
Oh, come on.
What the hell?
Yeah.
I also got a letter from one law firm representing one of the British banks. They basically didn't understand what BrandTrack is, and they thought that what I'm showing on BrandTrack is these are the case studies of the work that I did for this brand. And they company policy is that no agency is allowed to share the work they did with this bank. So they basically threatened me in a nice way to take off this this case study.
The old cease and desist. Yep.
To stop using the logotype. So at the moment, I'm not going to mention which brand it is, but if someone is very observant, they can go to the brandstrack.co/brands and check our logotypes. And there's one logotype which I had to create in PowerPoint, which is not the real logotype. Because if the brand tells me that I can't use the logotype, I can't use the logotype, but they can't tell me not to have their case study, because This is my work, this is my analysis, and it's based, I'm not using any of their trademarks whatsoever. This is what, any industry magazine would do. So yes, I had also a situation like this.
So it's a lot of, how many users do you have nowadays?
It's still early days, but I have around 200 users at the, probably by now at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first year, as you can imagine, no SEO, nothing, no marketing budgets, no media budget, and starting from scratch. The first year was slow. Then next year was better, and then 2019 was actually quite good. And I have really, really high hopes for 2020, and hopefully Brandstrack will become my only source of revenue.
Well, like you said, you were delusional. I mean, all entrepreneurs are. So I'm sure you're expecting faster growth. But that sounds pretty good for a brand that didn't have a lot of advertising spend behind it or social media behind it.
Yes, almost no advertising spend. Almost everything is through SEO. So if any of your listeners have their digital businesses, the power of SEO and the power of LinkedIn were truly, truly amazing.
Well, in our lead up to our interview today, doing my research and so forth, you talk about the concept of brand archetypes, which is a very simple but powerful storytelling tool. I'd like for you to cover that with our audiences, but I'd like to do that right after we take some time out to give a tip of the hat to our sponsor, and that's Sendable. And in hearing your story, I was talking to Gavin Hammer today, as a matter of fact, the founder of Sendable, and they've been at it for about 10 years now, that the growth of your organization compared to the growth of his, which is an online media platform, social sharing platform, is very similar. And it's fun because I hear the same energy in your voice as I get from Gavin about the delusional entrepreneur. We all have these big visions in our head, and how often do we wake up thinking, am I just completely and utterly delusional? Am I wasting a decade of my life in this and it's not going to work? But I can tell you that they do a great job at Sendable. We use them at Business of Story. And I would like to, share their story right now. And when we come back, cover with you this concept of brand archetyping in storytelling. All right, let's do that. Many of you have been following me in the Business of Story on social media for a while now, and I really appreciate it. And if you're not, I hope you will. We share valuable business storytelling tips to help your brand stand out among the awful noise out there. And we do it all thanks to Sendable, a social media management platform that helps over 3,000 digital agencies worldwide to work with their clients, breathe life into their brands, and get their stories heard on social media. What we like about Sendable is they make it super easy to manage your content and your stories online. They allow you to source content from clients and collaborate closely with them to create a social media strategy built on true and proven storytelling principles. You can reliably plan and schedule content to be automatically published to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and more. And you can demonstrate the impact that this content has had on your audience growth and conversion by reaching out through their in-depth reporting and analytics. There's much, much, much more that you can do. But you know what? I think maybe my favorite feature has to be Smart Posts functionality. Now, what Smart Posts are is it makes it incredibly easy to craft social media content and in one single step, customize it for each platform, giving you the best chance of driving engagement and getting people to pay attention to your content. Sendable truly makes managing so many channels an absolute breeze. I know you have a lot of choices when it comes to social media management apps. So I wanted to let you know we here at the Business of Story can't recommend Sendable enough. Gavin and his team are so great that they have a special offer just for you. You can now get, as a special offer for Business of Story listeners, Sendable's Traction Plan for only $69 a month. That's a 30% savings. So sign up now at sendable.com/Park30. Believe me, your stories will take off. Welcome back to the Business of Story. Park Howell here with Magda Adamska and her incredible website called brandstruck.co. Brandstruck, STRUCK.co. And the reason why I like it so much is I've been in the branding world for 35 years and have built a lot of brands from the agency side, working with clients and customers. And I know exactly how hard it is to get the necessary information from the client so that you can do your best work, the necessary information about the competition, the market, what's happening, how other brands are positioned. And it is hours and hours and hours and hours of mind-numbing research, trying to figure out if what you're finding is really any good or not. And it sounds like, Magda, you went through that in your life, and you've built now this amazing platform for people. Now, we talked about brand archetypes. I'd like to get your definition of what you mean by that and how do you use it in powerful brand storytelling?
Sure. So the concept of brand archetypes, actually, it was created by psychologist Carl Jung, and it was popularized in the marketing world by Margaret Mark and Carol Pearson in their book, The Hero and the Outlaw. So
which they are fantastic, because I had them on the Business of Story many years ago. In fact, while you're talking, I'll look up that episode. I didn't know you were going to be bringing them up today, but that is a marvelous book that we found. But go ahead.
So this is probably the most in-depth book on brand archetypes, and it would be great if they did a new edition, including newer examples, because some of the examples are probably now a bit too old now, but it's still a great introduction to the concept of brand archetypes. So brand archetypes is, I would call it, it's a brand classification. It's a brand typology. And there are many brand typologies over there, but the reason why brand archetypes are often chosen over other brand classifications is because they are believed to be already embedded in our collective consciousness, and that these brand archetypes have always been present in our lives through the stories told in books, movies, fairy tales, legends, or now even brand stories, because they are often constructed in a similar way and present similar types of characters.
Yeah, and they're like personalities, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's the way I think about them. And Jung had these 12 primary personalities, and there are other books that could take you into 56 different kinds, but I find those to be a little bit too involved for what we're trying to do in the branding world. You can simplify it by looking at any one of these 12 and determine which personality is best for the brand.
And I like brand archetypes because the biggest kind of advantage is the fact that they make brands easily understood. And I think this is the number one objective for any brand strategy. So many brand strategists focus on being very unique, very different, while I strongly believe it's much more important to be simply understood. And I always, in this place, I always give an example. So I read the piece of research, which actually Coca-Cola shared. So it turns out that 50% of Coke Zero consumers didn't understand what zero stood for. So they didn't understand that zero in Coke Zero means zero sugar. 50%. So if a brand with this level of understanding of branding and brand strategy and marketing and budget,
mind share, right?
Yes, if they couldn't kind of communicate properly the fact that Coke Zero means that this is Coca-Cola without any sugar, then imagine smaller brands with maybe, with resources not as impressive as Coca-Cola has. So that I always when I help clients with their brand strategies, I always make sure that the brand strategy is easily understood and will be easily decoded by the target audience. And that's why brand archetypes are great, because you can use these 12 brand archetypes. And just to give you a few names, so a few of brand archetypes are, like, for example, the regular guy, the ruler, the hero, the lover, the innocent. Even the names are so effective that you already know, if you have a lover brand, what it will, what probably it stands for. So by using one of these brand archetypes, some cases two, you can mix two archetypes. I wouldn't advise using more than two archetypes. You can ensure that your story will be understood the way you want it to be understood by your audience. And that's why I feel they are powerful. So this is not any type of magical, it's just making sure that your message will be understood.
Now, Magda, when you got into the branding world, were you trained and already using archetypes, or was it something that you came across? And the reason why I asked that is when I started, 35 years ago, and I was just like a copywriter, an underling at an agency, and we would go through this branding. We would ask the most inane questions to try to understand the personality of the brand. If your brand were a dog, what kind of dog would it be?
Yes.
If it were a car, if it were a magazine,
yes.
What would it be? And I sat there and
how it would behave at the party,
yeah. And it wasn't until I found their book, The Hero and the Outlaw, and I came across it about 15 years ago. And it was like, oh my God, this is the answer right here. And by the way, both Margaret Mark and Carol Pearson were on The Business of Story. I just looked it up. Show number 53. For any of you interested. So it was almost 200 shows ago, and it's still so relevant today. I agree with you if they could update their archetypes a little bit, but the core content is amazing and could really help you do these archetypes for a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you give us an example of an archetype, a couple brands and what kind of archetypes they are?
Sure. So maybe I will share some of my favorite examples. So, for example, an archetype called a regular guy, and the brand that I believe grasps the concepts of the regular guy archetype like no other brand is IKEA. So everything IKEA does is about the beauty of every day, which can be experienced by everyone. It's a very democratic brand. Like, there is nothing exclusive about this brand. Even the founder of the brand, I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing his name properly, but Ingvar Kamprad, he was at some point one of the richest people on the planet. So I know some people who still remember him from the times when he was doing a lot of business in Poland. Poland is where I come from. And he was sleeping in like just 3-star hotels. He would never sleep in any 5-star hotels. I'm not sure whether at that time there were any 5-star hotels in Poland, but he was always very down to earth and driving a second-hand car. And this philosophy is embedded in IKEA's DNA. So that's a regular guy. Another example, a slightly different of a brand using the regular guy archetypes is, for example, Walmart. Walmart is a different concept than IKEA. IKEA is very much about the beauty of every day, while Walmart is about saving money and living better. Then another example of an archetype, the outlaw. So most of the challenger brands use the outlaw archetype. Whether they do this consciously or not is another thing, but it's really easy to outdate any outlaw brand. So, for example, one example would be Dollar Shave Club. Have you heard about it?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Of course, Harley Davidson, Vice, MTV. This would be the brands using the outlaw archetype.
Working in the TV world, HBO would very
Mhm.
much be a disruptor type brand, kind of that outlaw archetype, because everything that they do seems to go against the grain of, anyways, good old family television. They're always out there disrupting. So versus, Comedy Central, which is going to be more of the fool archetype, but in
Mhm.
all a good way, and in
Yes,
all the
yes.
proper way. National Geographic being an explorer archetype, obviously, but that's people can start seeing.
Yes, explorer. So a very interesting brand archetype. I personally find it very interesting. Is the archetype called the innocent, because probably the least innocent companies in the world use this archetype to promote this happy image of the brand. So one brand using the innocent is Coca-Cola. Another one is McDonald's. So they create this world where, we have happy families, everyone is welcome, life can be pure, beautiful, and happy. And this is a very, very powerful archetype. And if your communication is based on one of these archetypes, such as the innocent, or another one is the caregiver, your consumers are willing to forgive you a lot if the perception they have is of you as an innocent brand or a caregiver brand. An example of this, when you're thinking about Johnson & Johnson, like the first image I have is like this small beautiful baby, and then you would never think that this company would be actually officially made responsible for the opioid crisis in the US. And yet, even though this ruling is official, because all the communication is based on this caregiver archetype, and when you think Johnson & Johnson, you think Johnson's babies, you see this mothers and babies, and you don't think a lot about the fact that they were also selling highly addictive drugs without actually disclosing the fact that they are highly addictive. So sometimes, the archetypes have really a power to build a certain perception of the brand, and that's why I really like using them.
In archetypes too, when you figure out what the personality is of that brand, and we use as many as 3, what we see when we do the interview is we will have a dominant archetype. We are the explorer archetype, but there will be a hint of caregiver in there, and there might be a hint of hero in it, or creator in it. And we use that then to help inform the creative direction, development, and anything from refining a logo to naming a company to what does the website look like and what is
the tone of voice, everything. Yep.
It becomes, it becomes your core personality that you go out to the world, and you can't lie about it. It reveals itself when you do your research. It's not something you just make up and say, oh, we're going to go from the innocent archetype to the ruler archetype. That's who we believe we are. It's not going to work unless you are truly a ruler and you've been masquerading as an innocent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you don't have a story to tell, if you feel like, what you're talking about isn't as compelling as you would like it to be, and maybe it's the industry you're in, maybe it's a B2B financial product, and you just really, it's data driven and it's hard to get people's minds wrapped around it. I take it that you advocate for really understanding what that archetype is, because it's that personality then that creates the differentiator and your uniqueness in the marketplace. Absolutely. And how you operate business.
Absolutely. There are many brands that actually don't have a very compelling story, or at least don't share, publicly their story, but they have such a strong and unique tone of voice that it creates, the personality for the brand.
For example?
Okay, so this is probably not everyone will agree with me, but what the hell?
That's okay. That's the beauty of having a point of view.
So there are some brands which are admired by a lot of people because they did something amazing, but which don't have a great brand strategy. And one of these brands is Netflix, for example.
Netflix.
I believe with the resources that Netflix has, its brand strategy, its messaging, its story should be much more compelling than it is. At the moment, it's very rational, it's very product driven, and it could be much more. However, what they managed to do, and especially on social media channels, they have a great tone of voice. And the way they run their Twitter account, for example, and other social media accounts, it adds so much personality to their brand. So they can almost get away with the fact that they don't have a really strong story for themselves. So that's one example. Yeah.
Did you see, by the way, that Netflix just got like 20 Oscar nominations? I just heard that on the drive-in today. So, I mean, going from, your rental house, getting your movies into what the content they're creating now is amazing. So they have quite a voice out there and they're producing great work. But your sense is they're not doing a good job with their own brand tone of voice.
So I think they do well with their tone of voice. I don't think they do well with their messaging, the way they describe themselves as a brand, what they stand for. I think they could do much better. Same with Uber. Uber is such now at the moment it's for some it's a polarizing brand, but I still believe like what Uber offers is great, and they could have an amazing story.
Well, and Uber does a beautiful job of their storytelling. I use them all the time as an example. Their marketing people do a fabulous job in how they capture and tell the Uber story. But from what you're saying, and I think I agree with you, is that the way they actually do business and their business model and the missteps that they've made in the in the public are just not in sync with that their great storytelling.
So because I mostly, I'm looking at kind of available brand strategy document, and checking how the brand is describing what it does and so on. And I personally don't, maybe in the US, their communication is better than here in the UK. But I think like sometimes they just get it, they get their messaging and they get their brand strategy, too complicated. Like previously, they had this positioning. The initial positioning was amazing, like everyone's private driver. But then they decided, they want to be more a regular guy kind of brand, available for everyone. And this positioning was too exclusive. And then they started working on the messaging. And then this messaging is just, I think it's a bit too complicated.
Well, you know what I did? I just totally blew it, because when you said Uber, for whatever reason in my brain, it said Airbnb.
I know, Airbnb
Uber,
is amazing.
I was talking Airbnb. My apologies to everyone. I screwed that up.
Airbnb is amazing.
Belong
amazing
anywhere. I mean, and a fabulous brand archetype. And what would you think? What would you call their brand archetype?
Which one? Uber or
Airbnb? Uber, I would think, is the ruler.
So Airbnb, I would say they use two brand archetypes. I believe that they're using the regular guy kind of archetype because of the ambition to create a sense of belonging in every part of the planet, which is kind of typical of regular guy. But there are, of course, elements of the explorer archetype as well, because they still encourage people to travel the world, discovering new places and experience the places, like a local. So I would say these are these two archetypes.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Regular guy.
So Airbnb has this is an amazing example of a company, a brand. Everything they do. Okay, maybe not everything, but most of the things they do absolutely well. And Uber is just, sometimes when you read the brand strategy document, you just open your eyes very widely and you just don't understand what they are trying to say.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So as you go through this and you look, and now you've been able to capture these 220 some brands on your website at brandstruck.co, what do you see that the really good ones have in common? And by the way, do you have on your site bad strategy that people can learn from how not to do it?
Okay, I'm trying not to do. There are a few brands which I don't believe have great strategies and could have better strategies, but you would not, by reading the case studies, you probably would need to come to this conclusion yourself. I wouldn't write this. I always give the benefit of the doubt. But some brands are really bad at this, and the brands that I believe are bad examples are the brands that don't treat their story, don't treat their brand strategy seriously. There are companies
I'm going to ask, do you have an example?
Okay. Let me give you a few good examples. I will give you an example. Okay. So, for example, Disney. Disney is very serious about their brand strategy. If I had to evaluate the depth of their brand strategy, execution of their brand strategy, uniqueness of their brand strategy, relevance of their brand strategy, I would give them probably 10 out of 10 for every single kind of KPI. They have a good brand strategy. They based on the magician brand archetype and the innocent brand archetype. So and they execute their brand strategy flawlessly. They protect Disney brand. They protect all the properties related to the Disney brand, and you will not see any piece of communication which is not on brand. At the same time, you have brands that have their brand strategy. They have something they created to document. And then instead of finding ways of bringing this strategy to life, what they do, they don't protect this brand strategy. Very often they give this brand strategy to, for example, a creative agency, which use this brand strategy as a springboard, but don't treat this brand strategy too seriously. On top of brand strategy, they come up with a communication strategy, a communication platform, because they want to create and they want to come up with great creative ideas. So they create a communication strategy which is completely either different than the brand strategy, or is overshadowing the brand strategy. And they create something different. And then when it happens often, and a brand works with a number of agencies, and they each has their own interpretation of the brand strategy, what happens? You have like a brand mess. You have a brand that uses 7 different archetypes, in each piece of communication, and it's not ideal.
And do you think Disney does this?
No, Disney does the opposite.
So you're holding them up as a good brand. I was thinking
Disney, absolutely, 10 out of 10. Disney is when it comes to brand building, Disney is absolutely number one. I remember I was working at Viacom, and we would buy sometimes shows from Disney, and they were always protecting the brand. They were always ruled, how to use content, how to add voiceover. Everything was. They thought of everything, how to deliver the brand the way it should be delivered. While many brands, they think that the moment they create a brand strategy document is enough, and it's not enough. You need to understand how this brand needs to be implemented at every single level of the organization, and in every single aspect. So there are brands that don't have a very compelling brand strategy, but it's brought to life in such a compelling way that that it does the job. And I think if I had to choose what is more important, I would say being like flawless execution is probably even much more important, and protecting your brand is much more important than getting the brand strategy articulated in the best possible way. It's much more important.
And it's so hard to do that flawless execution. So my last question for you, because I still want to go down this road just a little bit.
Yes.
If there were a brand out there that you like, that you think is a great brand but has lousy strategy or archetype storytelling to it, who would it be?
So Uber is definitely one, which I think this should be done better. Another one is Netflix. I also mentioned a lot of media brands. They don't do, apart from Disney. Disney does this amazingly. And alcohol brands, they are the best at having a good brand strategy and then delivering it. I'm not a big fan of what 7-Up is doing. Every year they change something. And when I saw their communication, I think it was a year or 2 ago, when they actually started communicating 7-Up as an ingredient in your cooking, and they did the entire campaign around cooking with 7-Up, I was surprised.
Yeah, it's a little weird, isn't it?
I'm not a big fan of what financial services brands do.
Yeah.
So when I analyzed it could be such an amazing and interesting category. Like financial well-being is such a important topic and will be more and more important. Yet the stories most of the banks tell, they are just the same. They even sometimes they use exactly the same wording, to describe themselves.
Yeah, not a lot of differentiation going there. So in the idea and the concept of delusional entrepreneur, now that you've got brandstruck.co going to show what some of the most admired brands in the world are doing with their brand strategy and storytelling, you can have a whole new offshoot site for those that are doing it poorly called brandstink.co. And then the whole goal, your mission, and your purpose in life can get them to navigate out of brand stink.
You know what's
Park? They got it dialed in.
I even have an alternative name.
Okay.
To be brand sucks.
Yeah, that one works too.
There are
brand struck and brand sucks. That's better.
So there are brands, but you know what? Sometimes you could see that they are not doing what they should be doing, and yet they are still successful. So there must be something, that they understand, better than
they service a need. They communicate well. They are able to connect with their audiences. But in this day and age, when we live in this land of abundance, where we have myriad choices to choose from, really understanding and dialing in your brand story strategy is critical if you're going to be successful in the long run. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, Magda, thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely fantastic, and
I'm so
honored to be your very first podcast.
And I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Well, and for those of you that want to learn more about Magda and her work, of course, I found her on LinkedIn, and I think I must have clicked through on one of your articles or something. That's how I first.
Or it was one of my cold emails.
Yeah, I don't know.
Might be also the case.
But if people want to learn more about you, go to brandstruck.co. Anywhere else they should go? Or is that the main thing?
Yes, and on Brandstruck. So Brandstruck, almost all the content is behind the paywall, though we are very reasonably priced. But if you don't want to subscribe, I write a blog, which is very popular. And it's getting even more popular, which I'm really glad. And I absolutely didn't see this coming, where I write about different strategies for different brands and cover a lot of different topics. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter, so no spam. And just if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, just send me an email at magda@brandstruck.co.
And that's Magda, M-A-G-D-A.
D-A, yes. M-A-G-D-A.
At brandstruck.co. C-O, not com, but co.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it. And thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. If Brandstruck will work for you, or if you've got clients and colleagues you think might be interested in it, share this episode with them so that they can hear firsthand from Magda and learn a little bit more about brand archetyping and what that's all about. I use it, and it is hugely, hugely powerful. And of course, if I can be of service to you, come on over to businessofstory.com. I've got tools, tips, techniques there to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And if you're trying to get your story out there in the world, visit Gavin and the gang over at Sendable. You can save 30% on their traction plan right now when you go to sendable.com/park30. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist on here like Magda, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.